welcome to Let's Talk About It with Taylor Nolan. I am your host, and today I am here with a fellow Bachelor and Bachelor in Paradise member, Kendall.
Hello there.
Yes, thanks for joining today.
Of course.
So first, I saw you on Ari's season, The Bachelor, and I wasn't really planning to watch that season, actually, but it happened, and you were definitely one of the people that, like, I always try to not judge after having my experience, but watching you, I was definitely like, oh, I feel like I could be friends with her.
I felt that too, though. I felt a connection with you. I was like, yes, friends before we met each other.
Yeah. Well, good. I'm glad to hear that you felt that back too, because I was like, yeah, I dig her vibes, and I was like, I feel like you're just like a great person in general.
Thank you.
And so I'm excited to have finally met you. We've talked via Instagram and the phone occasionally, but it's super nice to actually meet you in person. Yeah.
I know, right? Finally. After all these, not even years, I guess, months.
Yeah, it feels like years though.
It does,
Bachelor
in a
World
weird
things,
way. Time goes by so quickly.
They definitely do. And then you also had a 2-on-1 and I had a 2-on-1. Very different outcomes and just dynamics overall. But absolutely loved how you handled it.
Thank you. It's such a weird situation to be almost, I guess the whole entire thing of The Bachelor is you're in a competition. Not in a competition, but it's like you're competing for love or for the attention or something. So it was just a really weird world. And so in that world, I was just trying to support other women through it because I felt like if I showed the best version of myself and other people showed the best version of themselves, then he would choose someone that would just make sense for him, as opposed to choosing an altered version of this person that was trying to make look like an awful person.
Yeah.
So with the whole Crystal thing, I had a lot of empathy for her because she had been through a lot and she had opened up to me. And so I felt like I was one of the closer girls to her in the house. So the fact that she was acting that way, I just thought it wasn't her.
Yeah.
So I think I was just trying to come from a place of this really isn't you. You don't have to do this. And, and we both handled things differently, but
yeah, well, also just very different relationships. But one of the things I loved was that you really touched on empathy, and that's something we've talked a little bit about on the pod. Specifically, we really covered having empathy with yourself, and being able to practice that. But I'm curious, in practicing that empathy towards other people, especially in that kind of a setting, is that something that's always kind of come natural to you, or have you had times where you actually try to, intentionally be okay, I'm really going to put myself in this person's shoes and try to, actually express empathy to them?
Yeah, I think, I don't know, growing up, I used to not be as empathetic when I was younger, when I was really, really young. I didn't understand that people or things had feelings, and it was something that I kind of learned through the experiences. I moved a lot as a kid, went to different schools, and I kind of grew into understanding that people had feelings and they felt beyond myself. And I think that's something that all kids kind of go through when they're getting older. When I do this, it hurts someone's feelings, so I shouldn't do that. And so I slowly learned that. And I think that in my life now, I'm so painfully aware of other people's feelings that I can't help but to make sure everyone else feels happy. Because then if everyone else feels happy, then I feel happy as well. So I think it also has to do with just growing up with just a twin and someone that you have to consciously always be aware of. And just making sure that, you don't stifle their happiness in any way. I'm not sure. I feel like I just want to make the best version of everyone.
Yeah.
In some weird way.
Yeah. And I think it sticks out to me that you're if I'm around other people that are going to be happy, that I'm going to be happy.
Exactly.
And in that, it's kind of a cycle that kind of feeds itself. But then I'd be curious for you, where other people in your life return that to you.
Yeah, I think growing up, I was actually painfully shy, and I moved around a lot, and I didn't really have a lot of close friends. So my sister and I, we kind of seeked safety in each other, and we were really close friends. And we ended up being friends with people that other people kind of made fun of because we were people that people made fun of as well. So kind of just understanding that words carry so much weight, and you have no idea, even for a child, you don't realize how much someone's life could be shifted by something that you say. So growing up, I had a lot of the drama, of course, going through school as like a young girl.
Yeah.
I had a lot of, bullies and mean people. My sister, had gotten beaten up one time at school. And so going through that, I think I just don't want anyone to feel that way. And I just don't think it's right. And I think I just try to go out of my way to make people feel comfortable, because I felt like a lot of the times no one did that for me. So I'm just so like aware of how people are feeling, because I just know how alone I felt at times. And my sister and I were kind of in, our own little army against that.
Yeah.
So I feel like I try to, in my walking life, always keep that in mind.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I think it's something that other people can definitely relate to. I mean, and they may not have a twin or even a sibling. And so they're kind of going through that alone. I mean, I think back to my experiences, like I moved a little bit as well. And there were definitely a lot of those times where it's like, you're really alone, and you're actually, our last episode was on being alone. And just kind of trying to figure out how you sit with that and how you can actually reach out to connect with other people. And I mean, it sounds like you and your sister really found, connection and safety in one another. And I imagine that must have been like really hard for you to like see her go through that, and then hard for her also to like see you go through some of that.
Yeah. And I think I always try to make it an extra point to connect with random people, even someone at the grocery store or someone just in walking life, because everyone can teach you something, So I've had so many amazing conversations with people that I had no idea existed or had like that mentality on something. So I like creating a community of people around me, because I lacked that when I was younger. Although I had my family and some friends, I lacked that sense of like safety and community. So I feel like I always strive for that. Like wherever I go somewhere, I try to make a connection with somebody.
Yeah. And I mean, I agree. I'm very much the same way. And that's part of why like Seattle is such a safe community for me, because the friends that I've, developed there are like actually family to me. Like having that sense of community is so important. And we stress that so much on the podcast of like, if you are experiencing a difficult time, like to reach out to someone, like develop that community around you and move in a little bit closer to people, because you're absolutely right. Every single interaction you can learn from, and there's a possibility to connect in every interaction that you have with someone else.
Yeah.
And reaching out to those people who, maybe are sitting by themselves alone in the cafeteria or something. You never know what they're going to be able to teach you about yourself, or that you're going to be able to learn about them. And it really kind of all comes back to this like curiosity about life.
Exactly. Curiosity for people.
Yeah. And that's so something I like definitely picked up about you from watching, was like, she's just like very open and curious about other people, and very like, willing and interested and excited to move closer to people.
Yeah, and I love seeing how people view things differently. I think my beliefs are always very malleable, because I don't want to ever feel like I can't learn anything new from somebody else. So there's crazy subjects that are really controversial, like religion or something like that. I love talking about that with people. And, I've been in relationships with many different kinds of people, many different backgrounds, many different religions. And I like kind of asking the hard questions, because I think when people can reflect upon why they believe in something, either I can learn something, or maybe they can learn something that they haven't been challenged with before.
Yeah.
So I always try to make it a point to talk about things that are a little weird, and I think a lot of people see that as a little off-putting, but after talking about it, and after like fully opening myself up and not being afraid to like express vulnerability with people, I think then they see it's more comfortable to be vulnerable and open with me, and then it's just much more of a deeper conversation. Like, I don't really like the surface level conversations.
Yeah.
I want to go like really deep with somebody, because that's where you actually, I think so many people walk around and they think, oh, like, I met this person the other day and I talked to them about whatever. I'm like, but did you actually like really meet that person? Like, do you think you actually know who that person is? Or do you feel like you're projecting all of these how's the weather kind of conversations onto them, so you can like fill up your time with, I don't know, I guess filling up your time with like some sort of connection that doesn't really feel... I like connection that feels tangible,
Yeah. Something that actually feels like authentic and has some depth to it. And I'm curious for you how, if you can share a little bit about how you're able to like get to that point with someone, like in dating or even just in making friends, even of how you actually dig a little bit deeper to get to that like authentic connection?
I feel like in relationships, it's about celebrating vulnerability. So if someone's vulnerable with me, or if someone opens up to me in a way they haven't opened up before, and I see that they're really uncomfortable with it, just kind of celebrating it, being like, wow, I'm like really appreciative that you can be that way with me. And then probably putting myself at their level of vulnerability and expressing something about myself that's also vulnerable.
Yeah.
And I always feel like I have to remind people, like, it's okay to feel this way. A lot of the times I feel insane and crazy, and I don't know, where I'm going with it, and I don't know what I'm doing. And just to know that so many other people feel that way.
Yeah.
And it's to find comfortability in the chaos of like what your mind is thinking, because so many other people are in that same boat.
Yeah, that's just one of the elements of having self-compassion, having that like generalized humanity, the universal humanity aspect of understanding that, I may be coming off a little bit weird right now. I may not be making sense right now. I may not be doing this in the most perfect way, but I also know that I'm not the only person. And in that, being kind to yourself, which will actually allow you to then further connect with someone else. Because I think when we actually show those more vulnerable parts of ourselves, when we actually share, something really true to our story, that people 100% connect with it. And it's a scary like risk to take. And I'm curious for you, if there's something specific about yourself that like you're always kind of hesitant to share with a friend or with dating as that relationship develops, that you find actually leads you to connection.
I think that what people fail to realize is that imperfection is the thing that causes people to fall in love with you. Imperfection is the thing, like those little idiosyncrasies that you do. And like maybe you have a weird laugh, or you get really excited about something. Like those are the kinds of things where someone says, I love this person because they're unique in this way, or because they're imperfect in this way. Yeah. And I always say it's the imperfections that make someone perfect for you. And so I feel like I try to just like let go in those imperfections and like embrace how weird I am, because I know that there are weird things that I do, but there's weird things that other people do too. Yeah. And I kind of just like to throw it all out there. And it also makes other people more comfortable if I'm comfortable in my own skin. So usually when I'm with somebody, I try to get the silliness out of them. And, sometimes I'm not going to, if it comes to like a romantic relationship, sometimes my humor doesn't connect with someone else's humor. And I think it's about finding someone who has the same humor as you, because I think the most important thing in a relationship to me is finding humor in life, because that's the thing. The reason why humor exists is because it's something to deal with the pain that we have, right? That's why a lot of comedians are really depressed, because it's a way that's how they deal with the awful things that happened in their life. So I think one thing I've learned through my parents is, although they've been through a lot together, they've always laughed through everything. So it's so important to me to find somebody that can just laugh at me and with me and laugh at things. Like I love making weird voices for animals or people. It's just like have fun and poke fun at things, because I don't like taking things too seriously. Even the serious things you can laugh at. Yeah,
definitely. I think that's something that I've had to kind of step outside of myself to be able to actually put into practice at times, because I think I can definitely get a little bit in my head at times when it comes to the serious things. And I think being able to step outside of that and find the humor in it, not only can relieve a lot of stress, but it also, I think, brings you more to the present, to where then you are able to just continue to further connect with people. I know one of my things that would maybe be considered like an imperfection or weird thing about me are like just that I'm a real crazy cat lady. And it's something
that's so cute, though. Who doesn't like cats?
Yeah, well, there are some people. And for some reason, I usually always end up dating those people. And I'm like, what is wrong? Why do I keep dating people?
You can open their eyes up
like
to the
cats?
world of cats.
It's like the struggle is real with that. Yeah. But, finding that something that people would typically make fun of me for, and finding that, actually I've reached a place with myself where like, I really love that, because that shows my heart. Or like I burp really weird. Like my burps almost sound like frogs, or like,
that's funny.
Yeah, they're really strange. But like finding instead of like being insecure about it and being like in my head and being like, oh, I have to really like hide this burp from this person because what if they're going to judge me? Of just like, yep, that's what my burps sound like.
Turn it into like a funny quirk you can laugh at.
Yeah, exactly. And I think people really respond to that. And I completely agree with you that your imperfections are what people end up falling in love with you for, because they are what make you unique. And I think like we're under so much pressure just in society in general to like be this certain thing, you know, what we see in movies, what we see on the TV shows about like on TV shows on our shows.
Exactly.
Of, you know, what gets rewarded and what doesn't, with love. And I think it's really important to find that place. Are there things for you that you feel like you still kind of are working on to be more comfortable with, allowing yourself to be vulnerable in that specific way with someone?
I think it's interesting being on a show that's so public and everyone has their opinions about everything, because I find that the show gives you a lot of security and a lot of confidence, but it also makes you really insecure in a lot of ways because you have so many opinions. It's so weird to have people just kind of like picking apart who you are. And in the walking life, in the real world, no one would say anything like that to you, but maybe your friends would, but they know you. And now it's like absolute strangers saying things like, you shouldn't do that. This is awful. This is so unattractive. I'm like, you know, it's just so interesting. So I think in a way, trying to gain the confidence in that way, and also with, you know, social media, or you feel like, oh, that girl's so beautiful, or that girl's so beautiful, but just accepting that I can't be every single version of beautiful. You know, there's so many different versions of beautiful. And, one day I'll think this one girl is so gorgeous and I want to be like her, and I'll look at another girl who's completely different and be like, I want to be like her. But there's, you know, you can't be every kind of person. So might as well just be your own individual person, you know, with beauty. And I guess another thing that's always difficult is that being a twin, I have been raised with someone who looks pretty much like me. So my entire life, every single new person that I meet puts us side by side and points out the differences, you know? So it's weird. It's so weird to be like, oh, well, you have a mole here, and you're, you know, your face is this shape and your eyes are this shape. And you like really have the mirror up to you all the time. And people are like dissecting your face and you're like, stop it. You know?
I mean, I don't have twins. I would have never thought about that, but that's so true. Yeah. You definitely see that happen. And I have never put myself in those shoes to be like, what would that be like? And I can see where that could definitely send you some messages about yourself. And that's a lot to take in.
Yeah, I guess we try to be my sister and I try to be individuals. So then the differences are more obvious. So then they don't point out the small little differences, because those are the ones that you're like, oh yeah, well, your nose is bigger. And you're like, dang it. Like, no one wants, you know, so I do believe that having a twin has made me the best version of myself. Yeah. Because I'm constantly working at being a better version of who I am. And she is too. And we keep each other in check a lot. But, in a lot of ways, you know, if you have a bad day where you just don't feel attractive, your outfit's not as good and your sister's rocking it, and like, then someone's like, you guys are twins, well, let me see the difference. I'm like, not right now. Like, I'm not on my A game right now. Wait till I'm on my A game, then you can compare. Yeah, it's just weird. It's a weird kind of reality to have.
Yeah, and then to also be in this, you know, world of social media too, where it's like the comparison game is so real, and especially for me, at least, I think is also in Bachelor family, the comparison game is very, very
literally
real.
People rate you by points of how many people follow you or like you. It's like you have like a whole, yeah,
and I mean, I'm curious for you how you have learned or are learning to cope with this, like the comparison game, not only with being a twin, but from social media and from being on the show. Like, I think that's something even people who don't have any of those experiences can relate to.
I mean, I've had to deal with comparison my entire life with my sister, but this is on a whole different level. So I think a lot of the times I feel like when I first got off the show, I was so obsessed with looking at my phone and how many likes or followers and all that stuff. It's hard not to be absorbed in that because it's so new and weird. And you're like, well, why do people like this one over this one? And why?
Yeah, and there's like this curiosity there of like trying to figure it out in a way.
Yeah, so I think I try to just be like, oh, whatever. I am who I am, and I have enough people liking me and enough people disliking me, you know, to like in a lifetime to have to worry too much about it. And I think I get a lot more positive feedback than negative feedback, fortunately, you know, given how my experience has been on The Bachelor so far. So I just see other people who are struggling, and to other people who are struggling that are on the Paradise like right now or on the shows right now, I just tell them like, the people who are reaching out to you and saying evil things, they see that you are like, you have a louder voice because you can connect to so many different people. And they see you almost as a microphone to get their voice out there. So when someone says evil stuff and you post it on your page, you're giving them a microphone. You know, you're giving them attention. Like, that's what they want. People crave like relevance, and they crave like people knowing them, because that's how that's how we show that we exist, right? The reason why art exists and the reason why buildings even exist and architecture and fashion is because people want to say, wow, like this is me. I'm leaving my mark on the world, and you see my mind, you know? And so, you know, I guess art is in forms of like words too, even if it's like cruel words. People see that as their individual self coming out and their expression coming out. So I don't know. I always try to feed into the positive expression as opposed to negative expression. And although negative expression could be kind of beautiful in a way because it is such like a raw form of just like who this person is, it doesn't make other people feel good.
Yeah.
So
there was a video that I watched shortly before the show started airing, and I need to go back and rewatch it like several more times, but it was this organization, Mind Valley, I want to say. It was Mind Valley. And the video was about being unfuckwithable. And one of I took notes on this whole thing. Like, this video was so intense. It had so many good takeaway points. And if I can find it again, I'll list it in the episode description notes. But one of the takeaway points that has sat with me the most is about, like, when you become unfuckwithable, that the positive is and the positive or the negative is also like neither one can necessarily get to you, because when you're really taking in the positive and you're like, oh, this person, you know, said something or they validated this insecurity, like, oh my goodness, yes. Like, when you give that attention, then you will also end up giving the negative attention, because like you can't selectively numb your feelings. And so when you're like, when people are giving you messages about yourself, to really just stay grounded in what you know to be true about who you are. Because otherwise, like, if you're only taking in the positive and you're like, I'm only going to pay attention to the positive, that then all that is like feeding your ego. And then it's
you're
like,
opening
well, what
up the
about
portal for everything else?
Yeah. And then it's like, well, what about when this positive isn't coming in anymore? Then how will I feel?
Yeah, I agree with that. You can't be like picky and choosy, whether thinking like, oh, I'm only going to see the positive stuff and I'll feel good about that, but whatever about the negative stuff, because I don't know, people will say, just as much as people will throw out something negative, sometimes people will just throw out something that's positive as well. And no, I agree with that. I agree that you can't let any of them affect you.
And to me, the way I looked at it, and I mean, I guess this could also go for people who, you know, are also just on social media and not from a TV show, but that even when you get the positive, that you still have this understanding of like, that's great, but you also still don't know me.
True.
The negative, that's great, but you also still don't know me. And so for me, it's like staying grounded in what I know to be my truth and what I know to be my story, and that other people will have their opinions on it, and that's their opinion, and that's their perspective, that's their reality. However, oftentimes it's very different than what mine is.
What's interesting is seeing some of my friends watch the show with me and like having opinions on other people that I have known or been in, you know, have known really well, and then them saying things like, oh, that person seems lame, but I'm like, well, like, you don't really know that person that well, and they actually are a really cool person. And it's funny how people I see so close to me, and knowing that I tell them stuff about what I go through too with people having opinions, that they also have opinions. And it's weird to kind of like see how easy it is to slip into that. So I've always tried to be really aware with my friends and to tell them, like, I struggle with the same thing with people having opinions about me. So maybe you don't really know this person that well. So it's just interesting.
It's not a popular opinion to remind people that the people you see on reality TV are also people.
Exactly. It's like
It's not
character.
a popular opinion.
Yeah, it's not. Well, because I think we see them as a character.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we are kind of selected because we are characters of ourselves. Mm-hmm. They do exaggerate those characters.
Yeah.
Because, well, it also is a very saturated experience, so you can't help but be more of an exaggerated version of yourself.
And they can't fit everything in in an hour, 2 hour long episode.
They film 24/7. Like, how can they?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So yeah, it's important to know that you're seeing like only one dimension of somebody when there's so many different dimensions and so many. I'll watch things back from people that I'm friends with and be like surprised by how they handled a situation and be like, wow, like, why did you handle a situation like that? Mm-hmm. But also, like, we all have those versions of ourselves where we're like, ew, like, I shouldn't have done that, you know? And it's even more saturated, which is why with the Crystal situation, I'm like, you can look back at that and cringe, but also know that she's not an awful person.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And that same thing could be said with a lot of people that are currently on Paradise Now.
Mm-hmm. What would you say is something that you've learned watching yourself back is like an exaggerated version of yourself?
I think that one thing, before I went on the show, I kind of kept my opinions to myself a little bit. I wasn't really as outspoken. And because the show applauds being opinionated so much and giving your opinion and like talking about things, I was almost became more a saturated version of myself because it was applauded. So I am more opinionated now, and I do have a larger voice now. And on the show, I felt like usually I'll have opinions about like kindness and standing up for myself and standing up for people. But when I know that, for instance, when Ari was being bashed by Crystal, I knew that I cared about him a lot, and I knew that he was really sensitive with the whole Peter thing. And it was even more amplified because it was going to be on TV and because it was going to be in front of everybody. So I kind of was way more strong with that than I normally would be. I would normally, have a private conversation and be like, that's not cool. Or maybe I wouldn't even say anything, which is just as bad.
Yeah.
But I felt like because it was going to be in front of everybody else, I had to say something. So that was definitely an example of how I went way stronger than I normally would in the real world.
Yeah. That's an interesting thing to reflect on, that the show has kind of encouraged, in a way, this confidence of standing up for yourself and of speaking your opinion. I think for me, it actually did the opposite.
Really?
Yeah. I think that's part of why I was casted, because I do have a lot of opinions about a lot of things, and I'm like very matter of fact when I say things. Like when I know something and when I feel strongly about something, I'm like, yeah, this is that. Like, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of the feedback from the show caused me to definitely feel small and to close down a little bit and to be a lot more selective in the things that I do share. But I think now, as time has kind of like gone on and I'm like in a very different phase of my life, I definitely feel now like I've reached more of that point where like I'm confident in myself and in the things I say, and of just letting that be it. And people are going to have their opinions either way. And so I have to speak my truth.
Yeah. And also having something like a podcast where you can just kind of keep on expressing yourself is probably really therapeutic.
Yeah.
It's weird how there's like such like a narrow threshold of what is acceptable, right? You can only express yourself this much. You can only be quiet this much, or you don't talk at all. Like I'll see people's opinions saying this person never talks, but then if this person talks too much, and like, where is that window? Like, where is like too much or too little, So it's very sensitive.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm also curious for you how, like, if you reflect on, your process of like perhaps sharing more on the show and looking more into like standing up for yourself and speaking your opinions, like how that's played out in your personal life.
Yeah, I definitely feel like I express myself so much more. You almost get on this high of expressing yourself when you're filming and because everyone's asking you questions about yourself all the time.
Yeah.
And you're just like, I'm just like blah, 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 like telling you everything. And then as soon as I get back from the show, I'll have conversations with my friends and have to step back and be like, man, like, I'm sorry. I'm just like word vomiting at you right now. And no one wants to, because it's one-sided, right? When you're on the show, they're asking you questions all the time. You're used to talking about yourself. And I have to like keep myself in check and remember, it's not all about me. This isn't a show about me. This is real world. I have to be curious about other people. And so that's something that I was surprised, because normally I'm a really good listener.
Yeah, I was going to say, I feel like maybe that almost kind of like flip-flopped a little bit.
Yeah.
So it sounds like before, like you're very, very empathetic and you're very much like looking out for other people and focusing on other people's happiness and what they're going through. Whereas then the experience on the show kind of put a little bit of like a focus on yourself.
Yeah.
And that then coming off of that, you're realizing now like, okay, wait, like I'm maybe it's finding a balance of that it still is good because you've learned skills now to like open up and share a little bit more about yourself, but then also of like taking a step back and being like, okay, but wait, how was your week?
Exactly. It was something that I needed in my life because I definitely was way more like in the background of things. Yeah. But I find that every single conversation I have, almost every single day, is always about Bachelor stuff. And it's cool. It's like an easy conversation, but I also feel like I'm not really challenged in conversations anymore as much as I used to be because it's such an easy thing to talk about. It's like I want to talk about like other cerebral things, like what I'm reading, you know, or what other people are reading or what other people are going through, because that's how I can grow. And I'm almost in a weird phase of feeling like stagnant.
I'm so glad you said that. And I definitely want you to know that you're so not alone in that at all. Like almost everyone I feel like experiences this state of like limbo post show where your whole life does become the show and all your interactions, you know, it becomes a bubble. And I know for me, I thought going onto the show and coming off of it that, you know, I'm going to really be in it. Like, I don't want to look back and be like, oh, like I missed out on that, or I wish I would have done that. Like, I'm going to be in it and I want to take in all the experiences of it. But I forget who, I think Derek had a conversation with Desiree. He had like met her in the airport or something. And one of the pieces of advice that she had given to him was like, just don't forget to focus on like your real life. Like don't forget to still be in touch with who you are and not get sucked up in the show. And I was kind of like, yeah, like that's actually a really good other way of looking at it. Like, yes, you can still kind of take stuff in, but don't let it become the focus. And it kind of like tugged with me because I was like, oh, that's kind of like the opposite of what I was thinking would be good for me. But when I look back at my first experience, I'm like, yeah, actually, I think I would have been able to have a much better experience had I stayed in touch with like who I am and what my actual life was before the show. Because
it's an addicting world. It's such an addicting world. And I think it's like you go on the path of least resistance, right? So it's just easy. Yeah. It's easy, and there's so many other people who have been through it that you can connect with, and you travel with it, and, you know, there's just so many amazing things that happen with it. It gets so overwhelming that I'm like, wait, I have built my career to be like a production designer, and now I don't want to lose that because I've, you know, spent the last couple of years building to where I am. And it's hard when something seems so easy, but it's so temporary. I try to remind myself that all the time. It's so temporary. And, you know, coming up, they're going to be filming with the next Bachelor with a whole group of other girls. And that's going to, you know, it refreshes itself all the time. So I need to learn to like keep on refreshing myself in different ways, you know, and not to stay in that stagnation of just becoming like the Bachelor because there's so much more.
Yeah. And so you mentioned the production design, but like what other parts of your life do you feel you're missing or you feel like you've been neglecting because of being sucked into this bubble?
Well, I think the last couple places I've traveled have solely been because of Bachelor World or appearances or filming or something. So I feel like I really miss traveling. It's something that I do a lot and I want to travel on my own and I want to go out of the country. Yeah. And I want to do that. So that's something that I miss doing. And I also I love filming like mini spotlight pieces and documentaries and, you know, actually interviewing other people, not being the one that's interviewed all the time. Yeah. You know?
Very cool. I didn't know that was something that you like to do.
Yeah, I love it. It's just like, I think it's just talking to people and, you know, someone can like be collecting thimbles or doing something. Have you ever seen Huell Hauser actually? California Gold?
I don't think so.
Oh, it's like one of my favorite shows. Like this guy, he goes along the coast of California and interviews random people. So like the thimble collector, he would interview and he has like this accent. He's like, so you're telling me that you have 200 different thimbles? And she's like, yes, I do. And he's like, wowza, that's so great. And it's just like, he like is so excited for her little passion. And she probably spends her entire life people are like, she's a weird thimble lady. But to him, in that moment, she's like more than that. She's like, wow, you are the thimble lady.
Yeah.
So I love doing stuff like that. Like I interviewed like a pigeon breeder, and he like breeds over 200 different types of pigeons, and his whole backyard is full of pigeons. And he like showed me all of them, and it was just cool. Like I love getting to know people in that way. So that's something that I wanted to start focusing more on. But you know, it's just like you get distracted.
Yeah, but I can even see, I mean, on your face, like a little bit of like lighting up when you talk about doing that. And like just getting to know, I mean, what I take away from that is like getting to know the parts of people that they're really passionate about and that they're really excited about, but that's also different.
It's infectious. Like it's like I see myself as like a knowledge thief, because people spend their entire lives learning about. For you spend your entire life like doing therapy and learning stuff about that, and someone else maybe spends their entire time learning about pigeons. And you know, if I have a conversation with you or someone else, it's as if I can gain all that knowledge you've learned over that time period, and that's how we grow as a species. And it seems like selfish in some ways, or it seems like stealing knowledge, but in a way that's how we grow as people. We learn through each other and from each other, and that's how we learn about relationships. Even watching the show, we learn about relationships through other people who've experienced them. So you know, I like being a knowledge thief.
I think it's, if everyone is a knowledge thief, then we are all actually just gaining more knowledge.
Exactly.
Yeah, one of my really closest friends, Colin, who has been on the pod, and his episode was on white male privilege, but he loves watching Bachelorette because he's like, I get to learn so much about how these guys, you know, present themselves and what works and what doesn't work, and that, you know, he can pick up all these different skills from watching the show. And I think it's so interesting because I haven't heard people talk about the show like that, but I think you can absolutely take away a lot of things from it. Also understanding with a grain of salt that you're not seeing the whole picture.
Exactly. Same thing with documentaries too. You're not seeing the whole picture with those too. They're all very biased, although they're very knowledgeable. But like being like, I love like learning vicariously through stuff like that, through mediums like documentaries or, you know, film or television. Yeah. Like after you watch a movie, you always feel so empowered. Like you become the character, you know? And so it's cool to like take knowledge from their lives or their, you know, acted lives and to to put it into your own world, you know? So yeah, that's why I love being in film and television. That's why I kind of chose that as a career, because I was always different, always changing, always learning.
Yeah. You definitely have just like such this motivation and desire and passion to like learn about everything.
I feel like sometimes I'm like a broad but shallow pool of knowledge. So I know a little bit about a lot of things. I'm not like a specialist. I will research the heck out of specialists, you know, and gain a little bit of knowledge, but I'm nowhere near like the depth of some people who apply their lives to something that they're passionate about. And like that's why I love certain cultures, like the Japanese culture, where they perfect things. Like it's so great. Like I wanted to go to Japan so bad. That's where I'm going. The next out of the country place. But I mean, even like seeing the documentary Jiro Dreams of Sushi, like his life is sushi. And you think, oh, sushi's great. I'll go to like this cheap place and buy. But this guy, it's like everything is his life in sushi. And man, it's just so cool how people just like bury themselves in like perfecting something. If you were to pursue like perfecting or being a specialist in one thing, do you think you could pinpoint? It changes all the time. So I feel like I go through different phases, and I'm in a phase right now of entomology. It's like the study of bugs. But I used to be into birds before that, and then I was into, you know, just mammals or the sex of species, like different sexual dimorphism, which is like the difference between male and female of species. And then I was into food, or I was into like how we get what we eat, or more so like botany. So it always changes. I'm always in like the science realm, you know? And I love people too. I love like deformities in people, you know?
Like what kinds?
So
like physical?
Physical deformities. Just because, I mean, it's interesting to see how people's lives shift or find normalcy, even though they're very different. So I was reading this book called Freaks of Nature, and it was talking about the conditions in the womb that led people to have certain deformities, like cyclopia, or just you know, Siamese twins or something like that, and or if you were born without limbs, or in certain ways, it's just like how they found normalcy in their life and how although it seems crazy to us, they're kind of just like, you know, they've found comfortability. And I don't know, I was just like fascinated with different people.
Yeah. Well, and learning how their reality is their truth, but also their reality is so different than your reality.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it was weird because almost in a way it's like, it's not because we see it as quote unquote a deformity. It's not really. It's kind of just like, that's how nature is. Nature is different. It's never the same. And how evolution happens is from differences like that. You know, something, all of a sudden something works. And it's like, wow, this is cool. Let's all jump on the bandwagon of this. And suddenly we're all like walking, you know, I don't know. It's like, I have a very scientific mind. So, regardless of whether you believe in evolution or not, I just think it's fascinating to know that through change or through, the differences in how we are born and how that elevates us to become better versions of a species. Like, I just think it's fascinating. Yeah. You know?
Do you feel like this, like, passion and, you know, strong desire to learn about science is something that makes you different? Like, do you pinpoint that as something that's, like, unique about you?
Yeah. I mean, I think everyone has, like, a passion. Everyone's unique in some way about something. But you can't help what you're passionate about. Yeah. You know? So when I got a lot of hate for being into taxidermy,
you got hate for that?
Yeah. You know, but the thing is I loved the hate because I was like, wow, like, people really care about animals. That's really amazing, you know? And of course I felt like I had to explain myself, which is weird. Another weird thing. You feel like you have to explain yourself to everyone.
Absolutely.
So I was like, guys, I only collect cruelty-free and, you know, like vintage taxidermies. Like I don't support like killing things, you know, you feel like you have to kind of go into that world.
Yep. Been there.
Yeah, of course. You feel like, but it's hard to like, it's also really hard to sit back and let people judge you without supporting yourself. So I felt like in the beginning I was very focused on that. Yeah. But yeah, you know, it's just like I couldn't help being passionate about taxidermy. That was something that just made me happy whenever I was around it or saw it or was able to study it. So, you know, people are into so many different things.
Yeah. And I'm curious if you've reflected on, I mean, I take it that's not something that like your twin sister does as well.
Yeah, no.
Yeah. And so I don't know. I'm curious, like, as we talk about, you know, kind of understanding your differences and moving closer into things like to learn about yourself and to learn about other people and all of that, that like if, you know, a large part of like your interests in things that are maybe a little bit different and maybe some people would say are like weird are also just like a coping mechanism in a way to like have your identity be very unique and separate from what you're always compared against your whole life against your twin.
That can definitely be true. I mean, I feel like I throw myself a lot into things that I find like fascinating or interested. Yeah. And I think my sister does as well. I mean, I guess she's not the kind of person, she doesn't really support the taxidermy thing as much, although she really understands it after knowing me. But she's also very into like yoga and meditation and, you know, spiritual world and stuff like that. So that's something that she's really put herself into. Yeah. And I think in a way, we do want to have so vastly different personalities because we don't want to want to have a single identity. Because we have had, growing up, everyone's like, oh, the twins, or, oh, Kendall and Kylie, the Long twins, blah, blah. It's like, it's almost as if you're speaking about us as if we're one person. Yep. So having those things that differentiated who we were is really refreshing. And even on the show, no one knew I was a twin. With the whole experience, everyone thinking I was like by myself. And then they see the hometowns and they're like, wow, she's a twin. And it was almost weird to be snapped back into the reality of, oh yeah, like I have like this other person who's looks like me, you know, who was born at the same time as me.
Yeah. And would you say being on the show was the first experience that you had where it was kind of like you had perhaps like a full, complete identity, totally separate from being a twin?
That was definitely one of the moments. It was another moment when my sister and I lived in different cities. So she lived in Los Angeles. I lived in San Francisco for a year. And it was a very difficult year. The weird thing with twins is that you go through sort of a separation. It's as if you are born one person and you have to kind of pry yourselves away from each other to find independence. So we had that in college. And it was very painful. It's just something you really can't explain, you know? You almost feel like you have to like force it and then you come back together again as individuals and you celebrate your differences as opposed to depending on each other so heavily. It's like we were puzzle pieces. We fulfilled different areas in each other's lives but we completed one picture. So that was a weird thing. And then going through the show, I revisited that again because for 3 months, she couldn't talk to me and we couldn't have contact, and we're used to always talking to each other. So coming back, it was just such a weird shock to be like, oh, wow, like I have this other person who just knows me so well, but in a way I've evolved so differently because of the show that we have to like touch base again. Yeah, it's just interesting.
Yeah. And I'd be curious too. I mean, she's not here, but I'd be curious too to like hear how that experience was for her and what her experience was of it all.
Yeah, she has such an amazing mind. And she told me that it felt as if like she was mourning because she felt as if I had died because she couldn't contact me, and things that she thought were funny, she would just be like, oh, Kendall, this is funny, or oh, this is what happened today. And she couldn't do that. Yeah. So it's like, I mean, I'm sure everybody that's on the show, it's as if the people that are close to you are mourning, like mourning you in some way. So that's what she had said the experience was like.
Yeah. If you were like to speak to twins who were younger, and who were also like sister twins, what would you want to say to them? Oh man, I feel like I would say, don't fight the fact that you're twins. Yeah. I think a lot of twins try to fight the fact that they're twins. They become enemies almost with their twin, and they don't want to be associated with each other. They'll have different friends, different lives because they're so afraid of being together. There's like that resentment of like, no, I want to be my own person.
Exactly. Just don't fight it, Celebrate that you guys are so connected and so close. And it took me a while to kind of realize and appreciate my sister, not taking her for granted, because you're so used to the fact that no matter what, this person's going to love me and this person's going to be there for me all the time. And I've had experiences in college where I was like, wow, like this person could be hurt to the point of leaving, or we could really negatively affect each other if we're not aware that we have to respect each other as individuals as well, So yeah, just definitely celebrate and enjoy being a twin. It's so unique. Yeah. It's so fun. Like dress like each other, like
lean into it.
Yeah. Lean into it a little bit because it's just a unique way to experience things. You can always be individual. You can always be your own individual person if you move away or if you have a trip apart, but it's very rare to be able to celebrate being a twin.
Yeah. That's so beautiful.
Well, thank you.
It like makes me wish I had a twin. I'm like, wait, I want to celebrate this with someone else. Yeah. Like it seems like a very like beautiful way to go about celebrating life with each other.
It is. Yeah. I love my sister so much, and it's just such a weird, unexplainable bond that you have with somebody. And, I just always like, it's funny when I picture my future getting old with someone, I picture getting old with my twin. I picture us just like laughing and being like wrinkly old ladies, like on rocking chairs, just like laughing at things, because we have the same exact humor, the same exact, like pretty much upbringing. So we are so much on the same page with so many things. Yeah. Yeah. And it's a fun thing to have. It's like you're being born with a best friend. Take advantage of it.
Yep. Yeah. It's exactly what I was just thinking. I'm like, oh, you're, right from the get-go, you got your best friend right
exactly. There. Yeah. So it's an amazing gift.
That's so sweet.
Thanks.
Oh, so sweet. Well, thank you so much for sharing all of this with me and everyone else. And I really I've learned a lot about you. And so thank you for letting me be a knowledge thief of you.
No, thank you. I find your podcast very refreshing because you go more in depth and you kind of just really reach for things, and it's a fun conversation.
Yeah. I like to try to, invite people to move closer into other things, like having you on today is a way for me to also move closer into you and to see who you are and to give you a chance to own your story and to show who you are, you know? And I think there's always beauty in that if you come to it in a place of openness and respect and empathy. So I hope that whenever people actually start an episode to listen to it, that they come in it in a non-judgmental, open way.
Oh, there will be opinions, I'm sure.
Yes.
Kendall talked about evolution.
What a nerd. Yeah, no. I just think, if anything, I'm taking away from this conversation with you and from our episode is to continue to have curiosity, to lean into that curiosity of other people and of other things and of different fields and of the sciences and just all of it. Continue to be curious and move closer.
Yeah, it's such a weird world, you know. I mean, it's hard to like be distracted by the fantasy and like made up worlds when you know that our world, it can be just as surprising.
Yeah. So beautiful. Well, thank you so much for coming on. And if people want to like reach out and message or email or whatever about your episode, where can they reach you?
So my Instagram is KeyKendall88. It's a weird Instagram handle. I don't know why. I think Kendall Patrice is my Twitter. But yeah,
okay.
Social media stuff.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And thank you guys for tuning in to another episode. I love reading your guys' feedback on iTunes. So please continue leaving reviews on there. And you can send us emails at ask.letstalkaboutit@gmail.com. Thanks so much. We'll talk to you next time.
This podcast is brought to you by Wave Podcast Network. Check out all of our shows, including the Brain Candy Podcast, I Don't Get It, Babes and Babies, Coffee Convos, and Let's Talk About It.